Hello, and welcome to Can You Taste Ethics, a study of coffee. My name is Erin. I'm a freshman here at the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities, and this project is for a class that I'm in right now. It's a freshman seminar called Imagining Environmental Futures. My professor is Dan Philippon. He's a really cool guy, so if you're interested in sustainability, nature, indigenous science, our agriculture system in America, highly recommend this class. It's super cool. This is my passion project. It's my final, and I worked really hard on it, so I hope you guys enjoy. I am using lots of different sources in this video, and instead of just continually saying each author's name every time I say something, I'm going to be putting the article that I got it from and the author's name in the lower portion of your screen, so you can see where I got my information from, and of course that will also be available in the script. So as you can probably tell from the title of this project, I'm going to be talking to you about coffee today. I want to teach you more about the coffee industry, how labor exploitation affects the latte you get every day, and what you can do about it. If you're anything like I was a couple of years ago, you might enjoy coffee but not really understand where it comes from, how it's farmed, and you might not know that the coffee industry actually opens itself up to exploitation a lot. There's lots of child labor, lots of unpaid labor, and I feel like that not a lot of people know about this, so I really wanted to shine a light on it and encourage us to all drink coffee that is sourced more ethically. To start us off all on the same page here, I wanted to spend some time talking about what actually is coffee. How does it work? How is it grown? I'm going to walk you through the 7 steps that I found are the most important in the process of making a cup of coffee. And we're going to start with growing, then harvesting, drying, exporting, roasting, selling, and drinking. So I'm just going to expand on these a little bit. Let's begin with growing. Coffee comes from a tree because yes, it is actually a fruit. Not a lot of people know this, but if you look around your coffee shops that you go to, you might see pictures of these little red berries. Those are the coffee cherries, as they're often referred to. They turn red once they're ripe, otherwise they're green, and the thing inside the cherry is called the seed. So that is what we actually call the coffee bean. These coffee trees are planted in what we refer to as the bean belt. That's going to be located here. I'm going to put a picture because it encompasses many different countries, but some very popular ones would be Ethiopia, Brazil, Guatemala. There's many more. They're warm year-round, not too warm, but they're warm. They get lots of rainfall, which is what's important. They plant these trees together, and they call that a nursery, where they will produce fruit about once every 3 or 4 years. So this isn't an annual thing. Coffee takes a lot of time to grow. So how are coffee cherries harvested? Well, that's a great question, and this is the step of the process where I feel like a lot of the exploitation occurs. The process of harvesting is usually done by hand, where farmers will walk through the rows in these nurseries. They'll pick out the reddest cherries because those are the ripest, and they'll take those, they'll leave the green ones for later. You can harvest coffee cherries with a tractor, but then of course you're stripping the whole tree at once, and you're not getting that sort of quality selection that you do when you make people go out and harvest them by hand. After the harvesting process is the drying process. This is when the harvesters of the coffee cherries spread them all out in the sunlight and they rake them, sort of turn them over. They're slowly baked by the sun basically and dried out. Starting at this step, decaf coffee will follow a different process, but we're not talking about decaf coffee for the purpose of this video. After the cherries are dried, they are then hulled, which reveals the bean inside. This is when we get into our next step, which is exporting. This is exactly what it sounds like. Many different exporters will purchase the beans and then they'll sell them to international companies that want to buy the beans. Then it's sort of a race against time to ship them because beans do go bad. If you look at a bag of coffee beans from anywhere, it will have a best if brewed by date on the back near the barcode, and that's something that a lot of exporters have in mind when they're exporting their coffee. The next process after exporting might be something you're a little more familiar with. It's called roasting. This process usually occurs in the same country where the beans will be sold to consumers. So all that growing and drying, that starts in one area of the world in the bean belt, and then they export the beans to a roaster. The fresher the batch of roasted beans, the better. So how this works is roasting companies will dump a large amount of beans into these huge roasting machines. They're absolutely massive. So they'll be churned by this big arm at high temperatures, meaning that they won't burn, but they will roast. So the beans will get up to about 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And during this process,
Caffeole.
I don't know if I'm saying that right, is released from the beans, which is the oil that gives coffee its very signature smell. So if you ever go to a coffee roastery, it's like bam, in your face coffee smell. So then when the beans reach the correct temperature, they're immediately cooled, to stop cooking them. And it's in this step that we create coffee blends where different types of beans from different places in the world, we can combine them and then make a blend. Finally, we are here at the last step of selling and drinking. That was really long. It is packaged, dated, and then sent to a nearby shop. They might sell the beans as they are whole, they might grind them and then sell them ground, or they will use them in their own drinks. And then you go to your local coffee shop and you get a cup of coffee and you have no clue that the beans started in Guatemala and now they're here and you're drinking them. It's pretty crazy. And you may be wondering, who had this idea? It's a very counterintuitive process. So who figured this out? Well, we actually don't know because coffee is so old. There really isn't one story that we can go with and say, yes, this person invented coffee. But there is sort of a tall tale about an Ethiopian goat herder named Kaldi. He was around during 850 CE. He noticed one day that his goats were acting kind of crazy after eating the fruit from a particular tree. And he was like, wow, my goats, they're kind of hyper. Maybe I should try these berries. And so he did. Once he discovered that these beans made him feel this very energized feeling, he decided to share this finding with some religious figures who needed to stay up all night to pray. No one really knows if this story is true, but we do know what happened afterwards. Coffee began to make its way out of Africa through trade on the Arabian Peninsula. By the 15th and 16th centuries, it began to take hold in the Middle East, and then about 100 years later, it became popular in Europe. As coffee grew in popularity, of course, demand increased. Soon, European merchants were looking to take hold of the market. Eventually, the Dutch began growing coffee on the island of Java. Wink. While they were doing that, the citizens of Yemen were inventing the first roasteries, as well as trading coffee at the port of Mocha. And soon coffee was brought overseas and quickly became a staple here too. And of course, as America began its journey forward into the time of the Industrial Revolution, even coffee was turned into a commodity. So where do ethics come in all of this? I drink coffee almost every day. Lots of people drink coffee almost every day. It's not okay to just turn a blind eye to a lot of unethical practices that are happening in the coffee industry. I'm not saying that you have to change your consumption patterns overnight. I just want people to be aware of what's happening because I feel like most people don't even realize how unethically sourced it can be. And this video is not to make anyone feel bad for drinking coffee. This is just sort of to shine a light on the coffee industry. Do you know where your coffee comes from? No? Well, that's okay. It's certainly not something that is talked about enough. Let's take a look at this headline from NBC News. This article is from January 10th of 2024, so it's fairly recent. The headline reads, Starbucks sued for allegedly using coffee from farms with rights abuses while touting its ethical sourcing. What? Not Starbucks, I hear you say. Well, these authors tell us that, quote, a consumer advocacy group is suing Starbucks, the world's largest coffee brand, for false advertising. Now, if you don't know, as of not too long ago, every single bag of beans that Starbucks sold would have this message on it: committed to 100% ethical coffee sourcing. Wow, that is a big claim to make. So the National Consumers League, the group bringing this case on behalf of all American consumers, is basically saying, you can't sell this product with this message on it because this message isn't true. You know it's not true. We know it's not true. We know you know it's not true. It's false advertising. I am just using Starbucks as an example here because this case got a lot of attention from the media and I think it kind of shocked the public. So the rest of this article basically talks about Brazil and how, quote, labor officials have cracked down on several reported Starbucks suppliers over abusive and unsafe labor practices in recent years, including garnishing the cost of harvesting equipment from farm worker wages, not providing clean drinking water, personal protective equipment, and bathrooms, and employing underage workers. In 2022, 17 workers, including 3 minors, were rescued by Brazilian inspectors from modern slavery. This was a coffee farm managed by a man whose coffee roaster company received Starbucks seal of certification a month earlier. There's a lot to unpack here. Why does this happen? Why do we have underage workers picking our coffee? Why are these very popular brands getting their coffee from these farms that employ underage workers? So we need to go back to the very beginning, right where the coffee tree puts down its roots. While a majority of coffee consumption comes from industrialized nations like the United States, about 90% of exports come from still developing countries like Brazil, Colombia, Guatemala, and more. The goal of running any industry is to sell something for more than you bought it for. It's cheaper to source a product from a third world country where workers' rights are not well established and news coverage of these atrocities does not easily reach the consumer, sort of like out of sight, out of mind, right? But we cannot accept this line that big coffee is feeding us. Workers everywhere deserve to be treated with respect, and so do the gifts of our earth. Coffee's kind of a crazy miracle that we just happened to stumble upon while we were herding our goats in Ethiopia one day. Now we treat it and those who harvest it with such indifference and disrespect. In Brazil, exploited coffee workers can make as little as 49 cents an hour. On top of the incredibly low wages, workers often have a near impossible weekly quota to reach. To hit this goal, workers will pull their children out of school to help harvest the coffee fruit faster. This, of course, is one way that children end up in the coffee industry. In fact, about 20% of children who live in a coffee growing country will be exploited by the coffee industry in their lifetime. Sometimes kids are even kidnapped from neighboring countries, brought to a coffee farm where they will work for 3 or 4 years, of course in debt, and then released back to their country. How can we allow this to happen? Well, 26 million people work on coffee plantations every year. That large number is very hard to keep track of. Another large issue is that, quote, without official work documentation, workers are left with no legal claim to minimum wage, overtime pay, or labor rights protection as guaranteed by Brazilian law, end quote. Furthermore, indigenous people are often victims of exploitation in the coffee industry, and women of all ethnic backgrounds are often subject to sexual abuse. While there is an attempt at enforcement, only 0.5% of coffee farms are inspected every 3 years. Would you go to a McDonald's if that's how we did our food inspection? No. Then why do you buy coffee that comes from these farms? This is a very hard question to answer, and there's no perfect solution. But we can start encouraging businesses that champion coffee traceability. The roasters of Hermanos Coffee Colombian Roasters can tell us more about this. They explain in depth on their website, and I highly recommend that you check them out just to get a taste of what the coffee industry could be like if everyone cared as much as these guys do. So, coffee traceability is the quality of being able to trace back the beans in your latte to the farm where they came from. Roasters know that as people learn more about coffee, the desire to participate in ethical consumption is growing. Roasters who work with honest exporters, who work with honest farmers, will be proud to advertise their source of that product, just like you'll be proud to drink it. Tracking the journey of your coffee through the supply chain can also help the workers along the way build a reputation for themselves and advertise their own companies. People care about giving credit where credit is due. And last, but certainly the most interesting part of this entire project is what the Hermanos Coffee Roasters have to say about taste. On their website, under the heading Flavor, they write, quote, a result of better coffee traceability is that coffee is treated not as something uniform, where its value is measured in volume alone, but as a precious agricultural product where quality and price can vary depending on several different factors. Tip. Of course, everybody's coffee flavor preferences are different. There is no right or wrong taste profile when it comes to coffee, but traceable coffee tends to have had more time and energy invested in it to ensure the flavor is high quality. Transparency about coffee origin allows buyers and consumers to understand more about the processes and intricacies involved in preparing specialty coffee beans. End quote. So, this is where my experiment will begin. I'm going to go out into the real world and buy beans from Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, Caribou. Happy Thanksgiving. I'm here in my kitchen right now. You can see those beans behind me, and I'm currently grinding up all the beans that need to be ground, and then I'm gonna make a cup of coffee for my parents, and I'm gonna get their thoughts on each one and just see which of these coffees they end up liking the best. I'm just like putting it in this little grinder, filling it to the fill line, so they'll all be the same grind size, trying to cut down on the variables. So I'm very interested to see what they pick as their favorite. Just to show you the lineup here, we've got Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, Caribou, Iced Coffee, Cafe Bustelo, and then Stumpton Coffee.
Stumptown.
Okay, here I am back in my dorm room post taste test with my parents. I made a single cup for each brand, and then I had my parents taste the coffee, tell me their thoughts, and rate it on a scale 1 through 10. I did this for all 6 of the coffee brands, and this is what I found. I will insert a picture here that shows what my parents rated each of the different coffees, and these results are very interesting to say the least. My mom chose Dunkin' Coffee as her favorite, with Cafe Bustelo and Starbucks tying in last place for her, and my dad chose Starbucks as his favorite, with Stumptown being his least favorite. This is really interesting considering that he buys Stumptown for himself when he goes to the grocery store. These results were not entirely what I was expecting. Both of my parents chose chain coffee as their favorite. Is liking Starbucks really that bad? Is my dad an evil person? Well, let's do a deep dive on each coffee brand and see what we can find about their ethics, morals, sustainability, how they treat their workers, etc. Beginning with Starbucks, of course, as we've already talked about, they had a lawsuit against them. They were claiming to source their beans sustainably, and they were not. More recently, however, Starbucks workers around the country are actually striking due to unfair labor practices. According to this Forbes article by Pamela Danziger, Starbucks workers are striking for better hours to improve staffing in stores, higher take-home pay, and a resolution of hundreds of outstanding unfair labor practice charges related to union busting, end quote. So as we've already established, the ethics of Starbucks corporate are less than exemplary. However, my dad still chose that as his favorite. Now moving on to Dunkin'. They say on their website that they are committed to 100% sustainably sourced coffee by 2025, which is now. They say that, quote, since 2018, we've been a part of the Sustainable Coffee Challenge, a collaborative effort led by Conservation International to make coffee the world's first sustainable agricultural product, end quote. Seems great, right? Well, actually, as far as I can tell, Dunkin' is doing okay with their ethics. They've even partnered with the Rainforest Alliance. The Rainforest Alliance is a coalition that aims to protect rainforests, their biodiversity, and they want to basically encourage sustainable farming practices. The Rainforest Alliance is very legit. They don't just partner with anyone, so this is a seal of approval from me to Dunkin' on that front. The one thing I would like to see Dunkin' do better, and of course Starbucks, is championing better traceability. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Having traceable coffee is one of the best things that you can do. It's great for the consumer, great for the farmer, great for everyone involved. And even though they may be partnered with the Rainforest Alliance, they may be shooting to have sustainable coffee by the end of 2025. I still don't know where these beans came from, so I can't fact check that. Moving on now to Caribou Coffee. This is interesting because the bag that I bought from Caribou here in East Bank also had a Rainforest Alliance seal on it. It also had a QR code on the side of the bag that said, scan here to see where your beans came from. So I was like really excited about that. I tried to scan it. It took me to a website. I just couldn't figure out how to make this work. It was just a strange, poorly designed website. I was very confused. I couldn't get any search results. Like when I was hitting search, like nothing was happening. There's something to be said there for accessibility. You can put a QR code on your bag, but if I can't figure out how it works, then I'm willing to bet a majority of coffee drinkers can't either. Caribou says that they have partnered with Enviritas. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Enviritas. So I went to Enviritas's website. I guess they use satellite imagery to analyze forest cover. I was kind of confused by what they do. At the end of this complicated website, they say they, quote, visit smallholder coffee farms around the world to understand their social, economic, and environmental practices. In 2022, we will visit 50,000 farms across more than 20 countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, end quote. So first of all, I'm a little concerned as to why this website has not been updated in 3 years, almost 4 years. They then go on to say that, quote, coffee companies receive a responsible sourcing claim if they fulfill 3 steps. Undertake an independent assessment of their supply chain on an annual basis for sustainability issues, work on these issues proportionally to the coffee purchases of the company, and conduct an independent evaluation of their efforts to create impact. Okay, holy word salad. I mean, notice how just in this description, the company doesn't have to be objectively sustainable. They just have to be working towards sustainability proportionally to the amount of coffee that they're selling. So I'm just confused, really. I feel like this doesn't really say anything. I'm looking for someone who really takes a stand and says, we understand that people are exploited on coffee farms. And what we do to prevent that is we go to the coffee farms and we talk with the farmers, and here's who the farmers are, here's where we're getting our coffee. Complete 100% transparency. You should be able to do that so easily with nothing to hide. But it seems to me like so far, Starbucks, Dunkin', Caribou, they've been kind of vague with their claims, and I'm looking for something really specific here. So we've talked about the 3 big chain companies that we tried. Now let's move on to the smaller coffee companies. Now, Cafe Bustelo did used to be much more popular. I was not alive at the time, but in the 90s, I think that they were much more popular than they are now because they've been beat out by bigger brands such as Starbucks. On the bag of the Cafe Bustelo coffee, it says that they give back to Latin American communities, and this is definitely true. On their website, it says, quote, each year we offer multiple $5,000 scholarships to college students at institutions that are members of the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. Since the scholarship program began in 2014, $1,050,000 in funds have been awarded to 210 students nationwide. I do think that that's very impressive. This is a direct act of giving back to a community that I wish more brands would do this. And while it is great that they're doing these scholarships, it's not exactly what we're looking for. They don't really say a lot about what they're doing for the environment, and they certainly don't say anything about the traceability of their coffee. So when it comes to sourcing, they may as well be just like the other 3 brands we talked about earlier. Moving on to Stumptown. This is a brand that I feel is definitely marketed towards men, and there's a lot I could say in terms of how coffee is marketed. I mean, that would be an entirely different video. I think that this specific blend that my dad buys is called something like Hair Razor. And this coffee has a package design that really makes you feel like you're making coffee in the trenches with your fellow soldiers. I mean, that's just how strong it is. So I went to Stumptown's website. They have a short video there about sustainability. And something cool about Stumptown is that they use direct trade sourcing, which means that they have actual relationships with their farmers. They know who their farmers are. They visit the locations of the farms, and they're proud of it. I could go on with some of their more sustainable actions that they list on their website, but there's certainly a lot there, so I encourage you to go check it out if you'd like. They have also committed to B Corp since 2018. I had not heard of B Corp before I started this project. On the website, it says that, quote, B Corp certification is a designation given to businesses that have passed a rigorous assessment and are deemed to be operating at the highest standards socially and environmentally, end quote. That is what I like to hear. Okay, so far, Stumptown is my winner. The only thing that I'm really missing is where the coffee comes from. Stumptown's website does a great job at explaining, we know who our farmers are. We know where this coffee comes from. We're proud of it. Okay, tell me where then. It's kind of frustrating. All these brands make big, sweeping statements about their environmental actions, their sustainability, and how they support their farmers, but it's also incredibly hard for me to figure out actually where the coffee comes from. I spent a lot of time looking on the website, and I didn't find anything along the lines of traceability. But we are not done yet. We have one more brand, Peace Coffee. This brand was recommended to me by Dan because it's the coffee that he likes, and I was immediately drawn into this brand because they actually have the country of the beans you're getting on the front or the back of the packaging. Now, this doesn't automatically imply that they use sustainable and ethical sourcing, but this is already farther than we've gotten with most of these other brands, right? I literally couldn't find a single website that would tell me what country this specific bag of beans came from. Right off the bat, their website is all about sustainability. I do really feel like their image is definitely centered around sustainability. I mean, even just the name Peace Coffee, that implies something. So, of course, I hope that they can back up these pretty high standards that they're setting for themselves. As I was scrolling on the website, I even found this section where they write in big letters, tastes better because it's better. After reading more, I've learned that Peace Coffee was originally started as a nonprofit for farmers. And here's the part that I really, really, really love. On their website, you can click around just a few times. I'll show you off to the side here. You can get to this this part of their website where they show their farmers and they list their farms, where they're at, and you can click on each individual header and learn more about that farm. Guys, look at this beautiful website. I was absolutely blown away. After clicking on each location to learn more, you're actually presented with a map that places the farm in the context of that country. You even get the altitude at which the coffee cherries are grown. And here's my favorite part about it. When you scroll down after clicking on a specific farm, you see which blends from Peace Coffee come from that farm. This was just so refreshing to see. I was really starting to worry that I wasn't going to find any sustainable, traceable, environmentally friendly, ethical brands in this whole video. I got really worried there for a second. I'm just so totally impressed by Peace Coffee. I'm very happy that Dan recommended it to me. It seems like he's making the right choice when it comes to his coffee. For the taste test, I used the Birchwood blend, which once going to the website, I could quickly find its origin, Marcala, Honduras. I don't know if I'm saying that right. So I read a little bit more about this farm, where the Birchwood blend came from, and the women who own this farm have an amazing story of overcoming hardship and abuse. Please read about it. It almost made me cry. A quote from their website says that, quote, they own 100 hectares as well as a wet mill, drying patios, and a compost production plant, end quote. I think we have found our winner. In conclusion, my parents' taste did not line up with the brands who had the best ethics. In fact, it seems like the opposite. Now, I must admit that 2 people is a very small sample size. I wish I had planned a little better and took more time to have a wider scale taste test with more people so I could get more opinions. The results of this experiment actually got me thinking, am I willing to sacrifice people's safety, livelihoods, futures, happiness, freedom, etc. to have a cup of coffee that's only slightly better than its counterparts that do support fair wages, independent women, who don't have child labor? And something interesting I also noticed was that while my dad picked Starbucks as his favorite, he doesn't like going there. He's not really interested in going to Starbucks, and I think especially after I show him this video, he will want to go there even less. My mom just straight up thinks that Starbucks coffee tastes like cigarettes, so this isn't as necessarily applicable to her. But as far as my dad's attitude goes, I think that's something that we should all strive to do. Have empathy, self-control, educating ourselves, facing the facts, not shying away from the truth. I really like Starbucks chai and matcha. I actually wrote this script in a Starbucks. And as I've been going to Starbucks and Caribou recently, I've been plagued with the same thought. It's not worth it. I don't need a sweet treat that bad. I want to be someone who has good ethics. I'm studying philosophy right now, and things like good morals are important to me. I want to be someone who can say, no, I actually don't want to go to Starbucks because I don't support what they do. I don't want to be that person that throws morals out the window because something tastes good. Because what would that say about me? That I'm willing to put the small, insignificant amount of pleasure that I get from a coffee above the well-being of 26 million coffee farmers worldwide. Humans' well-being and quality of life is something that I truly believe we cannot put a price tag on. So I'm going to challenge you in the same way that I'm challenging myself. Have some self-restraint. Skip the Starbucks trip and vote with your dollar to support an ethical and sustainable business instead. It might not be easy to quit your caramel ribbon crunch frappuccino, but as Marcus Aurelius once said in his Meditations, if it's not right, don't do it. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope this video taught you more about the coffee industry, how laborers are exploited constantly, and what brands to stay away from and what brands to buy from. I will certainly be looking into Peace Coffee more, as well as Stumptown. I think that voting with your dollar is very important because it shows these companies that people are actually paying attention to what they do and who they treat in what ways. This isn't an easy switch to make overnight. I'm not asking you to quit Starbucks cold turkey, and this is probably something that I'm going to struggle with as well because there's lots of Starbucks where I live, there's lots of Caribou. But I hope you understood the overall message here that sometimes we need to make personal sacrifices to do the right thing. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, I will have all of my resources linked in the description of this video, as well as in the script. I hope you've enjoyed. Have a good rest of your day.